In today's macro photography tutorial, we're doing a little bit of food photography. I've got some great tips for you guys to improve the lighting in your food images, making your dishes look as delicious as possible. Stick around and I'll get started in just a sec. Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adaptalux and welcome back to another macro photography tutorial where today we are tackling a little bit of food photography. Now, I'm not a professional food photographer by any means. I'm also not a professional chef, so we're not photographing any big plates of food today. We're going to keep it nice and simple and photograph an ice cream. Now, that's going to give us plenty of opportunity to experiment with our lighting and demonstrate how changing our composition and our lighting can influence the mood of the viewer and how they perceive your food, which is a really important factor when it comes to food photography. When you're gathering images of food, most of the time the purpose is to show it to someone who you want to eat that food. You want that viewer to perceive your food in certain ways. For example, if you're photographing a nice juicy steak that's just come off the barbecue and you're shooting that really far away with a color temperature that makes everything look really cold, then the meat is not going to look appetizing. You want your meat to look warm and hot and delicious and juicy, so you want nice warm tones on that food. The opposite is true for our ice cream. I want our ice cream to look nice and cold on a hot summer's day. So we want to try and make the viewer perceive that the environment is hot, but the food itself is nice and cool and refreshing. I'm going to tackle that in a couple of different ways, and I'll show you everything that I do step by step. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do is pose your food. So this is my little ice cream cone. It's nothing special. It's not a particularly gourmet ice cream. It's just a little freezer ice cream, but we're going to try and make it look as delicious as possible. So if you've got some really nice gourmet food, your time will be a little bit easier than mine, but I want to demonstrate this with something fairly simple. So I've taken my ice cream out of its wrapper and I've placed it into a bottle, which is going to pose my ice cream upright. Now, I'm not going to need to see the bottom of the cone here. I'm going to be shooting mostly the ice creamy bit at the top and maybe get a little bit of the cone in as well. So no matter what you're shooting, you're going to need to think about how to pose your food. If it is just a plate of food, then you can just place it down on a nice white surface and perhaps shoot from above. But something a little bit more complicated and dynamic like this, we're going to want to be able to move around and take a look at different aspects. If you want to shoot on a tripod, this gives you the good opportunity to actually move the subject around instead of moving the camera as well. Now, I'm not going to talk for too long because my ice cream is going to start melting, so it's time to start shooting. So the first thing that I'm doing is taking a look around freehand with my camera to find what kind of composition and angle I want. I'm using a very versatile lens for this. This is a 100mm f2.8 Tachina lens on a Sony a7 III. That Tachina lens is actually a macro lens, so I can zoom all the way in here and get quite a lot of detail on the surface of my ice cream. Now, that might be really interesting for a shot, maybe pointing off the side here, but you'll see that we lose a lot of the context of what we're looking at because of a very shallow depth of field. So you might want to explore some wider shots, some closer shots, and certainly take a look at all of the different angles around your subject before you decide where you want to set up, say, a tripod and some lighting. Lighting is really important for food photography. It's one of those aspects that can change the mood and the feel of your images and the perception of the food itself. If there's something slightly off with your lighting, it's going to make it look like there's something slightly off with the food as well. So most of the time, you're going to want to have as natural lighting as possible. However, that's not always possible. Sometimes you're shooting in a dark, dimly lit gourmet restaurant and they only have trendy orange lights all over the place. Perhaps you're shooting in a seaside restaurant where there's only one very large window and the sun is blaring in through it. You've only then got light on one side of your dish and the other side is completely in shadow. Both of those scenarios are going to end up with food looking, well, not its best. A lot of the time we can correct for that though, and we can also change our environment and take control of some aspects of our lighting to bend things into our favor. You do still need to consider that we're not going for crazy creative lighting all of the time. We're trying to replicate the ideal scenario with lighting that is balanced and has the correct color temperature. Color temperature is particularly important with food. There's a lot of different types of food that look better under warmer or cooler light. I'll leave you guys to guess which one our ice cream is going to look best under. I'm going to be taking control over my lighting in the studio here using the Adaptalux Studio lighting system. This is a lighting system designed specifically for macro photography. It's got flexible lighting arms that plug into a control pod so we can have lots of light sources in a small area. It also means that I can point these light sources exactly where I need them to be and have very fine control over my shadows, diffusion, and color temperature. The color temperature aspect is brand new to the Adaptalux Studio. We now have warm white and cool white lighting arms with slightly different color temperatures. The effect is very subtle, but it can make all the difference for something like an ice cream. So as you can see, I've added a bit of cool white lighting. Now these are our brand new cool white lighting arms, and we're going to take advantage of the different color temperature between the cool white and the warm white to change the mood of the image. So I've set up a couple of cool white lighting arms here as my key lights. This one here is doing most of the work and lighting up this vanilla side of the ice cream, and then we have a second one over on the other side just balancing the light out. It is important to balance your light when it comes to food photography. Generally, harsh shadows across the front of your food, dark patches, they're not going to look very appetizing, and they are potentially even going to look moldy or just generally not very good. So we do want nice, even lighting across the front of the food itself. That's very, very important. You do also want to pay attention to reflections. Food has a very uneven structure most of the time, and particularly ice cream, as it's starting to melt, will change the way the surface of the ice cream reflects light. So you can see that we've got a little bit of reflection along this drip of chocolate sauce, and that's going to look nice and appetizing. Now that I've got some initial lighting on my ice cream, it's time to take a look at the background. The background is looking very dark because of all of that light that we've put onto the ice cream, but there are still some random light sources hanging around in the back there from the lights in my room. Now I've not turned off all of the lights like I usually would because I want to emulate the scenarios that you might be trying to shoot some food in, like a restaurant where you can't choose where the lights are on the bar behind the food. You can't ask them to turn all of the sparkly fairy lights off, so you might want to have an option to take control of what is behind your food. Now I'm going to be doing that by using our background gradient cards. These are simply pieces of card with different colored gradients printed on them. These are really easy to slip in behind an image like mine today and completely change the vibe of the surrounding area. I'm going to be using these to change how the environment around my ice cream looks to the viewer. Now I need something to hold those up, so I'm going to be placing them in the macro subject holder just here, which has some flexible clips, and everything should create a nice, sturdy, self-contained, if a little complicated looking setup. So then guys, you can see that our picture has changed with the addition of that nice background gradient card just being held up by our macro subject holder right behind our ice cream. Now I've chosen one that goes from a nice gradient of blue into pink into orange, and that I think gives a nice sunsetty seaside vibe that you're maybe enjoying an ice cream at the end of a nice warm day. However, that's not the only thing that has changed. You'll also see that I've added two more lighting arms. So I've got two warm white lighting arms this time, shining at the background. So I've kept the separation between that cool white lighting for the ice cream itself and added some warmer lighting to contrast in the background. This first lighting arm over here is shining around onto the side and the back of the ice cream. That's going to give the impression that there is a light source, maybe the sun, over here setting in the distance and shining some nice warm light onto the back of the ice cream. The other warm white lighting arm is coming around here and lighting our background, giving that, again, a nice warm color temperature to contrast with the cool color temperatures on the front of the ice cream. Now there is one last thing that I need to do, and that is to adjust the lighting balance. Now that we've added those underfused lighting arms and in the background, I think the background is looking a little bit too bright and the ice cream itself is looking a bit dark and not very appetizing. So what I want to do is just change the balance of the light using the Bluetooth app for the Adaptalux Studio. I can select some of these lighting arms and use the slider to very quickly adjust the level of light that is being emitted by each lighting arm. That means that I can change how each area of my image is looking and adapt accordingly. So I can say, well, maybe we do want that background to be a little bit brighter and bring in a little bit of extra light. Very fine adjustment to all of these different parameters until I'm happy with where the light is falling on my ice cream. After my initial shot there, I've grabbed my camera back off my tripod so that I can go exploring around freehand. I do want to get some closer in images, and I want to be a little bit more flexible as my ice cream melts. I want to move around and try and grab all of those changing aspects, get a few closer shots, and pick out a few details that might make things look a little bit more scrumptious. For example, there's some condensation forming on some of the chocolate, which I think makes things look really, really appetizing. Now, you might think really close-up images of your food are not what the client is looking for or how you want to display the food, but you've got to remember that a lot of the time food images like this are displayed in a group, so you're choosing a lot of images to go together. So some close-up images alongside the larger image of the dish itself can really help to draw people in and think about particular aspects of the food itself. For example, if you're shooting a salad and you really want to make a big thing of the fact that they've put almonds there in the salad, that might not be apparent from a full shot of the dish, but you can zoom all the way in and get a little bit of extra detail there that shows off the almonds in the salad. This can go for pretty much any type of food. Do just keep in the back of your mind that some close-up detailed shots can go hand in hand with a wider image. So as I've been talking, my ice cream has been slowly melting, and this brings us to a good point where we can talk about how your food is going to change over time. Now, ice cream, again, is a very good demonstration of this because it melts very fast. Everybody knows ice cream melts, but all other kinds of food is also going to change over time. Perhaps you're photographing some hot food and you want to capture that steam that's coming off it. You're going to have a setup ready to go by the time the food comes out of the kitchen. You don't want to be waiting around trying to figure out your lighting and situating your camera while your food is cooling down, because a lot of things are going to change. Not only is that steam going to stop, but the juices are going to come out of your meat a little bit more. The bread is going to dry up over time. So you do need to be aware that shooting food does have a time limit. And that's why having a setup like this, which is very, very quick and easy to put together, despite how complex it looks, can be really advantageous. I've done all of this in the time that it's taken for this ice cream to slowly melt, which has been about 10 minutes. Now, I do have backup ice creams as well, and I would recommend that if you're getting a critical shot, you're probably going to want some backup food as well. But do be aware that most food is going to have some sort of time limit. That means that you need to set up as much as you can before you start shooting, and when your food comes out, you need to adapt very, very quickly. So then guys, as I finish off some very melted ice cream without trying to get it in my beard, I hope this video has given you a few insights into how changing your lighting, changing your background And thinking about color temperature can affect the way people perceive your food images. Now, ice cream is a pretty obvious one. You want it to look cold and refreshing against a nice warm environment. So we've done exactly that by using our warm white and cool white lighting arms against a nice summery backdrop. But this can still apply to a lot of other types of foods, and you just need to experiment with what works for your particular type of food. The biggest hurdle is just thinking about it in the first place. What do I need to do to make my food look delicious? Do I need to have some extra warm lights or some extra cool lights? Maybe some creative colors to make a restaurant's food look a little bit edgy, unique, and cool. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to food photography that isn't just how is the food positioned and where do I want to position my camera. You do need to think about things like lighting. All of the lighting that we've used today, including the brand new cool white and warm white lighting arms, are all available on our website. You can get entire packs that will set you up for food photography in pretty much any scenario. I'll link to our new lighting arms in a pack of their own up in the top right hand corner now, and I'll also link to our lighting down in the description, where you can also find our background gradient cards and the subject holder that we've been using today. If you want some ice cream, I'm afraid you'll have to go out and find that yourself, because for now, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.